looking for brighter seas.
No buttons, no, okay. Path.
Down. We dirty. Young blood. So yeah. Okay.
How to survive. I know this goes without saying, but the key point in any raid is always going to be to survive, at any cost. On average, a loader can be quite costly. Between armor, meds, and weapons, getting into a raid is going to set you back around 150k, which over time can be quite draining. So how do you guarantee your survival when loading into a raid? Well, to simply put it, you can't. What you can do is increase your chances of surviving by a shit ton. When you load into a raid, you should be going for a main objective, whether that be a task, money runs, or even PvP. You should always have some form of purpose. For example, when doing money runs, it's always going to be a good idea to avoid high traffic areas. Plan out your pathing beforehand and have one for a few different spawn points, that way when you load in, you have a general idea of where you're heading. When you're at the start of doing this and looking at what map to do, it's always a good idea to pick a map you know the best. This way you feel the most comfortable with your surroundings. So let's talk map choice. I know by default a lot of people look to figure out which map is going to be the best choice for beginners. The most common answers are going to be factory and custom. While factory is a good choice when you're trying to get the PvP aspect of things down, it's not necessarily the best choice when it comes to making money. With that being said, customs is probably going to be the better choice. Keep in mind that you should learn every map, but those are some good starting points. The reason I suggest customs to newer players is because it's where a good amount of starting tasks are, and you can find a decent amount of loot in not highly contested areas, including items you'll need for future tasks. If you're also looking to get in some decent fights and trying to PvP, there are a few areas in the map that are notorious for PvP, so you can get a good feel for that on this map on top of everything else. Other maps such as Labs or Lighthouse are going to be your high PvP zones. While these maps are a given for some of the best loot in the game, it's also home to some pretty wicked AI. It's rather challenging to kill. With that being said, I do encourage you to try out these maps every once in a while just to get a feel for them. So what next? Let's talk about pathing. I know we touched on this a bit earlier, but I want to go into detail and explain the purpose of pathing and why it comes in handy in every instance. So what is pathing? Well, it's just choosing a route or path that you plan to move to get into a certain point or destination. The reason for pathing, to simply put it, is to have a predetermined direction that's going to get you to your end goal with the least resistance. When planning this out, you should have a good idea on where other spawn points are in relation to your current spawn. So, it's always going to be a good idea to have a certain path for each or roughly each general area of where you spawn. By doing this, it gives you a better chance at surviving, since you'll have a general idea of where you're more likely to engage into a fight, based on where you spawned at. This will give you a good idea on where you need to be more cautious. Now, when you finally decided on what map to run and roughly mapped out your pathing, going with the path of least resistance, the next step is avoiding PvP. When I say this, I don't mean to run away from every fight that is around. At some point, you're going to have to fight. Whether that be a scav or a PMC is entirely based off of your pathing. Generally speaking, when you're looking to make some rubles, it's always going to be a good idea to make sure you're not just rushing into generally known PvP areas, and every map has them. For example, on customs, you generally want to avoid dorms and strongholds. Both of these areas are where you're going to get into majority of your fights. With that being said, there can be some decent loot spawns there, but at the end of the day, you're going to increase your chances of getting into a fight if you go there. So if you're trying to make some rubles, it's just better to avoid these areas. Every map has tons of areas that have some decent loot in them. Even when starting out, just picking up everything you can instead of extracting empty-handed is always going to be a better idea. While some items are better than others, it takes a little bit of time to get a good idea of what's really worth keeping versus swapping out for higher tier items. If you're afraid of the dark, what better way to get over your fears than do some night raids? I don't know if that will actually help you get over your fear of the dark, but it will help you increase your chances of surviving. So there is one downside to doing night raids, and I'll be upfront about that right away. It does kind of turn Tarkov into a horror game, but that's just at the beginning. Once you get equipped with the proper gear, just head on over to Skier, pick up a set of NV10s with the proper TAT amount, and you're good to go. You see, not a lot of people run night raids, and when they do, more often than not, they don't have a set of NVGs on. So that puts them into a situation where they can't see more than a few feet in front of them. Meanwhile, it's practically daytime for you. Okay, maybe not exactly daytime, but you can see a lot more than they can, giving you quite the advantage. Whether you use the advantage to fight or to completely avoid them is up to you. Night raids aren't as heavily contested, which increases your chances of survival, while simultaneously increasing the amount of items you can make it out with, in turn increasing the amount of rubles you make. And we all like making rubles, right? For the last tip, I just want to talk about the appropriate playstyle you should be going for when your main goal is survival. Play slow. There's plenty of time in raids to do what you need to do without having to run all the time. I know Tarkov can be nerve-wracking and things can get pretty stressful, but in every instance it's always going to be better to give as little information or sound to anyone around you as possible. This is where the stop, look, and listen method comes into play. Especially now with the audio update and some sounds being fixed, along with others just being non-existent, you actually have the ability to sneak or crouch up on your enemies without really being heard. Instead of rushing into areas, you want to make sure you're taking the time to feel out and collect information beforehand, that way you know what you're getting yourself into before you fully commit to something. Be cautious and clear angles and areas by lean peeking or strafe peeking. That way, when or if you do decide to engage into a fight, you can do it by your way instead of playing into the enemy's playstyle. You control the pace. And that's everything. I just want to thank you all again so much for watching. If you're new here and enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and let me know. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're watching this shortly after upload, I'm currently live streaming on Twitch. Link in the description. I'll catch you guys in the next one.